Okay, so welcome everybody to February's webinar. This is our second webinar for 2013. So this webinar will go through selecting files for backup sets, and adding network shares. And it's primarily for Mozy Pro on servers. Okay, so we'll get started. So my name is Niall Fahy. For those of you who haven't joined before, I am the EMEA Technical Education Specialist at Mozy here in Cork, in Ireland. So I train our internal support agents as well as external partners and customers. I've been with Mozy now for about 3.5 years. I started here in the tech support team. Okay, so as we said, this webinar will cover selecting files for backup, using backup sets, and adding network shares. So what we will do is I'll go through this brief slide deck, and then I will give a demonstration of each of the topics we talk about, and then we will open it up for questions at the end. Okay. So just for some definitions in terms of license types. So as you may be aware, we have 2 license types available for Mozy Pro customers to purchase. But when you're using a server OS, you can only use a server license. So because this session is about server OSs and using Mozy Pro on servers, then that's the key we're going to be talking about. It's primarily designed for server operating systems, but you can run it also on a desktop computer. It's used for backing up network shares and network applications. So if you have a network share on your Office network, then you will need a Mozy Pro server license to back up that network share. Okay, so moving into selecting files for backup. So what files should you be selecting? So ideally you should only be selecting your most important and critical files on the server. Obviously that goes without saying. If you're backing up SQL databases, Exchange, Active Directory, especially in work environments, these are the most, for a lot of our customers, are the most important, I suppose, databases and files to be backing up on an ongoing basis. Other files that would be important are work-specific files. I suppose if you're an accountancy firm, it's finance software. An architecture firm would be, I suppose, any software that you would use for doing drawings and making plans and so on and so forth. That software would be your most important. So you should always start there when selecting files. You should be looking at first and foremost your most work critical files. So those files that if you had a disaster in the morning, you know, your server crashed or your laptop crashed, that they would be the files that if you didn't have them, you would not be able to do your job. It's the ones that are the most important to you to continue your business in a disaster situation. What files should I not select? Not necessarily not select, but what files were probably not necessarily needed to be selected for backup. Items like system files, that probably goes without saying for some people, but others may not be aware. System files are those specific to the actual OS and the OS software. They're files that even if you restored them, they're going to be no good to you on a new machine. There are specific files like, you know, executables and so on and so forth that would be part of the operating system, so that they would, even if you restore them to your new machine, they would be of no use on your new machine. Programs downloaded from online. You'd be surprised at the amount of people we see backing up the executable files or the .dmg in Mac cases of software they've downloaded from online. So the likes of internet browsers they may have downloaded, like Chrome or Firefox, and they're backing up the executable files for those. Not just those, and there's other software that you download as well from online that people would back up, but they're taking up space you don't need to be using. Okay, because if for example you're backing up a server and you have all your users' machines on there, and you're backing up all their entire C drive, and there's system files and programs downloaded from the internet on there on each individual machine, you're multiplying them over, if you have 30 computers on your office network backing up to the one server that you're backing up to Mozy, then that's a lot of repetition of files. But not only that, if you're backing up files that you've downloaded from the internet, what's happening is, if you, in the situation where if your computer died or was stolen or anything along those lines, if you're going to be restoring files from us, you're going to be coming to Mozy, requesting a restore. We're going to build that restore. Then you're going to download the restore from us just to run an executable that you could download faster by going back to, say, for example, Google's website or Firefox and download their browser directly from there. So these are files that people sometimes do back up, but it would be faster for you just to go back and get them from the original source in terms of like programs like that would download like software. Non-critical files, I suppose, in a business's sense, probably, items like music files that if somebody in the office has their own some music tracks or iTunes on their laptop, anything like that, things that wouldn't be specific to the actual day-to-day running of your office. So, we all build up on our work computers, depending, if they're not entirely locked down. We build up things like, when you're plugging in your phone, maybe to charge it, you have, maybe you might have, like if you have an iPhone, you might have your iTunes on there, and you might have a couple of songs. And if you're backing up that, and again, if it's 30-odd people in the office, all with their central storage on your server, and then you're backing up that server, that could be a lot of files. I mean, because we know music files can be quite large, and iTunes libraries in particular can grow quite large. So these are probably non-critical files to your day-to-day operation, and if people can back them up, then they might do so not knowingly, but this can all add up to greater storage demands for your own backup and greater costs for yourselves. Okay. So how can backup sets help me? So backup sets allow you to group specific file types. So if you see the Mozy default backup sets, when you install Mozy, we populate our default backup sets. And these are generated from kind of the most common files that people would select. So you have the likes of PowerPoint presentations, Excel worksheets, and spreadsheets. You have stuff like Word documents, music, mail. These are predetermined default backup sets that we've created. Okay, but you can also create custom ones yourself. So if there's specific file types that you want to back up, or from specific locations you want to back up from, then you can create backup sets for that. And this gives you more customization to what you back up yourself. And we'll go through how to create backup sets in the demonstration in a minute. You can also exclude and include certain file types or groupings. So as was mentioned a while ago, with music files, you could exclude them if you wanted to. So you could exclude them, create a backup set to exclude all music files and on your C drive. And then that backup set would pull any music files on your C drive and would exclude them entirely from your backup, no matter if there was a folder you had selected also for backup and there was a music file in there. The exclude rule would supersede that and it would block it from being backed up. Backup using VSS snapshots is a very useful tool to be using when you're backing up databases, and we'll speak to that further on the next slide. So the include exclude rules. So this is one I'll explain in the demonstration. It's easier to explain when you're actually viewing how to do it. So Mozy in this instance, so we use Windows logic for creating backup sets, and because that it's system logic, it's different to the logic that we would think. If you were to logically think how you would exclude something, the way we would think it's slightly different from in terms of Windows logic on the computer system. So when you actually want to include something, or to exclude something rather, you need to include it first in the backup set. And I'll explain that in the demonstration, and I'll show you how it works. So when should I be using backups sets instead of file system tabs, instead of the file system? So are you backing up a database or a server, specifically Exchange, Active Directory, or SQL, any of these type of databases? If so, if you are backing up one of these databases, we recommend strongly that you should be using the VSS backup sets for these. So VSS backup sets are created by the system. So if you install Mozy on a server, when Mozy is installed, it does a scan of the file system. It will pick up, if you have VSS writers there, so it will create a VSS specific backup set. So if you have Exchange, it'll pick up the VSS Exchange writer, and it'll create a VSS backup set for that. And these backup sets generally have maybe 5-6 files within them. So they have 5 or 6 files within them that we back up, and that saves you having to back up the entire Exchange database, all the log files. So if I was to give you an example, so if we look at it, say for example, an Exchange database. So how does Exchange work? In a nutshell, there's a file within Exchange called the e00.log. It's created and it's created as email transactions occur. And this file just grows and grows until it reaches its maximum size. Maximum size is generally set at 1 megabyte, but it can be increased to 5 megabytes. Okay? So once this happens, the file is renamed to a set value.log. So sometimes it's like e00 and then a 1234.log, and then once that one is full, rolls over to the next 123 e00 1234 56.log, and so on. And once that rolls over and creates a new log, the original e00 log file is blanked out, and the cycle starts again. So the more mail transactions happen again, this log fills up. And because of this constant changing, it can be quite confusing to a VSS writer that isn't designed to handle that information. So that much information that's constantly changing. And this could be rolling over every couple of, like every 30, 40 seconds, depending on how much your Exchange server is being used. So it's a lot of change happening in such short spaces of time. So because of this, Exchange uses a specific writer, and that's the Exchange writer. And it's used to back up the database. And it's designed to handle all the chaos within that folder. Okay, so if you were trying to back up the Exchange database using the File System tab, so actually going through the File System tab in Mozy and selecting your Exchange database in there, and selecting all the files and folders within that, what I'll attempt to do is copy all those files and folders in the Exchange directory. Okay, and like that's because what will happen is it'll start using the system writer in Windows VSS instead of the Exchange writer. This can cause a lot of issues because the system writer is not designed to handle Exchange, and because of that, then it leads to common errors with the E00 log file, and it'll often fail to back up because there's so much changes happening in that E00 log file, and it's rolling over once it's full and creating a new log file every couple of seconds, and it's happening at such a rapid pace. The default system writer can't keep up with it, and it'll crash out. However, if you're using the Backup Sets tab, you'll see the VSS specific backup set for Exchange. And this uses, as I said, the Microsoft Exchange writer, which is designed to cope with this constant change. And it's built specifically for all this change that happens. And using this backup set, VSS backup set, rather than actually selecting the files and folders, what happens is all these log files are truncated, and then they're incorporated into the EDB database, and then this database is backed up using VSS. So, as I was saying a while ago, in the VSS backup set, you now only have maybe 4 or 5 files within that VSS backup set, whereas if you were to open up the actual Exchange database on your File System tab, you might see maybe 100, maybe 60, maybe 50, depending on how much activity you have in your Exchange mail server, different files within there. And what it does is it truncates all these and incorporates into one small EDB file, which is a small database file, and then it backs this up. So, and this all happens during the backup process using VSS components in Windows. So this all happens in the background for us. And the advantage of that is it results in a more successful and healthier backup for you. And the advantage as well of using backup sets, VSS backup sets, and specifically for backing up Exchange, Active Directory, SQL, and these, is that when you're restoring them, it's a lot easier. Okay, so most Microsoft programs, when you go to restore them, so if you have had the unfortunate situation where you've had to restore an Exchange server or Active Directory, they have an inbuilt wizard that will allow you to restore the Exchange database using VSS snapshots. And this is a lot easier. Now, thankfully, touch wood, I have avoided the actual, myself personally having to do this, having to restore an Exchange database or an Active Directory database. But having spoken to colleagues here who've had to do it in previous jobs, it's not a pretty thing to do if you have to do it file by file and log file by log file. Whereas using VSS, it's a lot more faster process. Okay, so I'll show you in a minute the VSS backup sets that I mean when we're going through the demonstration. Okay, so using network shares with Mozy, and we're moving on to the final section of the presentation here. So Mozy will work when communicating with a properly configured Samba share over TCP IP and using standard authentication methods. So that's generally most network shares will work because they are configured properly with Samba like this. So it shouldn't be an issue for most network shares that are on the market. Okay, so it does require, however, that the unique naming convention be precisely adhered to when defining a network share. Okay, so there's 3 components to adding a network share within Mozy. So you need the location, which is the path, username, username and password if they're on your network share. Okay, and on that, if you do already have a drive mapped to a network location, you can select it from the drop-down menu, and the proper path will be populated. Okay. So your path or location must use the following convention. So it's / server name / share. So maybe, for example, you know, / server name / Nile for my own maybe, or it can also be IP address / share. Okay, so sometimes with Windows you have problems with accessing network shares more than once. So sometimes you can actually bypass that and create 2 connections to the one network share by having one connection use the server name / share and the other connection using the IP address / share. Okay. So your username will require the following format. So it needs to be domain / username or hostname / username, IP address / username. It'll need to follow that convention. Okay. Reason being, it's down to Samba authentication. Okay. If you don't include it, what'll happen is that, so if you say, for example, I'm on box A and my name is Niall and I'm trying to authenticate to box B, and if I only put in my username in the field, it's going to send the authentication stream box A / Niall to box B, but box B won't understand what box A is, so it will just turn down the authentication request. So that's why you'll need to put in the domain name or else the host name or else the IP address before you put in the username. Okay. Passwords on network shares will just need to be Samba compliant passwords, and as long as it's 64 characters or less. Okay. So that is just a brief description of the topics in today's webinar. I'll go through some demonstrations now. Okay, so just give me 1 second here now, I'll just open up. Okay, so we have here. So in terms of file selection, our first demonstration. So you have two options here. You can select from backup sets or you can select from file system. Okay. So file system, as you may already be aware, you can open down and go through each individual machine or the individual machine through your documents and settings, and you can pick out the folders that you want and so on and so forth, and you can pick them out like this. So as you can see from this one here, okay, there's a couple of things selected already. So if you select a file here in the file system tab, it also gets marked in the corresponding backup set in here. Okay, so as I've selected these backup sets here, okay, the files that are within those backup sets also show as selected here. So if I deselect a file from the file system tab, it gets deselected in the backup sets. If I deselect a file in the backup sets, it gets deselected in the file system. Okay, so just be careful of that if you're selecting files in one area and deselecting them in another, that it's actually copied on both sides. Here, as you can see, there's a gray background to the option here. So what that means is that if you have a tick box in the option here, okay, what it means is that, so like that, when it's white like that, it means I've selected that folder and everything within it. If it's a grayed out background, it means that the folder is selected, but not every file within the folder is selected. Okay. Now, the disadvantage to that is that if you do it that way, what'll happen is that if you add in any files to that folder later on, they might necessarily get picked up straight away for backup. So what I would recommend you doing is if you want to if you want it to happen, so what I would do is, let's say, for example, okay, I'll open up my documents here, and I'll say for my downloads. Okay, so my downloads, if I come in here, okay, and select that option, it gets selected one file, not every file. What you should do generally, if you have numerous files within a folder, and maybe there's 2 files within that folder that you don't want to select, what I recommend doing is select the entire folder here first, and then go in to the folder and untick those options. What will happen then is that if any other files are added to that folder, they'll be selected for backup going forward. Okay. So that's just a file system tab and how you can go through that and select your files and folders directly if you want. Backup sets, on the other hand, are just that bit easier. They group files and folders together for you, and if any file is added to the machine at any stage and they match rules in a backup set that you've created, they get added to your backup automatically. Okay, so for example, I have my word processing documents selected here. If any kind of files or folders were to get selected or get added to my backup later on, then like a TXT file or a .doc or .docx or anything like that, they will be added into that backup set. Okay, and I wouldn't have to worry about them. Okay. Thing to note there. So these are generally the rules on these. You can check them if you wanted to see where they're searching. So as you can see here, it's searching my computer, so my entire computer. So if I had an additional drive on there, it would search there as well. Okay, and it'll tell you here the types of files that rule is searching for. So as you can see here, there's quite a lot of them. Okay. So as I was mentioning before, these here are the VSS backup sets. Okay, so when the actual backup set is starts with these parentheses and VSS in them, they're created by the system. So these backup sets are created when the file system, when we install Mozy and the system is scanned, these backup sets are picked up by the software because there's a correlation between them and a VSS writer for this software within this system, and Mozy picks it up and adds this VSS backup set. As you can see here, this Active Directory VSS backup set has only 4 files. Okay, so it has these 4 files here. So if I was to select that here now, okay, so that will back up my VSS, back up Active Directory using VSS for me. It'll back up those 4 files, and you won't have any issue with it then. It'll pick up all the changes because these 4 files encompass all the files and folders that would be in your file system tab section. Okay, you can of course as well select them in the file system tab. You just need to browse to the location that they're saved in. But I would recommend not doing that. I would always go for the VSS backup sets, primarily because it is less chance of causing an error, because that VSS backup set will have its own VSS writer that's specific for that software or that database. And also it's easier for you when you want to restore into your Active Directory or your Exchange or your Excel afterwards, or Exchange, pardon me. So that's VSS, they're the VSS backup sets. So, and that's they will be automatically populated there. If you don't have them there, then you may need to rescan the file system set. So if you add in, so if you have Mozy installed on a VSS or on a server, pardon me, and you later on add in, say, an Exchange database or a SQL database onto your machine, Mozy won't pick it up until either A, you relaunch the setup wizard, or B, you rescan the file system set. And the second option takes, you need to change a registry key. So what I would say is that you should probably contact support if you need to do that, okay? And they can go through with you how to do that. The easiest way obviously is relaunching the setup wizard, but the problem with that is that any configuration changes you've made, you will lose. So it's not exactly, in one sense it is easier, in another you might lose out on a lot of configuration you've created yourself. Okay. In terms of adding your own or creating your own backup sets, you're just right-clicking in the white space here and add backup set. As I said a while ago, if you want to see what any of these backup sets that are created already for you are searching for, just right-click them and you can edit. And if you want to as well, you can remove the backup set. Okay, edit the backup set will show you where it's searching and the rules, so what it is searching for. Okay. In terms of creating your own backup sets, so if you add a backup set here, okay, so you get this view here, okay, and you give your backup set a name, so we'll call it webinar, and then you can select where you want to search. Okay, so if you want to select your entire My Computer, it'll search all your computer for it. Then you can add a rule. You have the option to include and exclude here. Okay, and then you can do it by file type, size, when it was last modified, when it was created, the file name, the folder name, and so on. So what I'll do here is, because this is a virtual machine with an OS operating system, I'm going to actually open up on my own machine here because I'll be able to search for more files. Okay, so I had the virtual machine running because it has a server OS on it and I wanted to show the VSS backup sets. So here on my own one, if I go to add backup set, okay, and search my entire, add a rule. So I include the file type dot, we'll say mp3 or .docx or .doc. So include file type .doc. Okay, so I OK that. It scans all the files that are on my system, and it's scanning my entire C drive. Okay, now it's created the untitled backup set, and it's returned these documents to me. I have 16 of these documents here. Okay, and it's selected them for backup. Okay, and subsequently any files that I add to the machine within my entire computer that finish with .doc will be added to this backup set. Now, as we were saying a while ago, how would you, if you wanted to say, if I wanted to exclude these .docs, what you can do, okay? So logically we have include and exclude here, okay? As I was saying a while ago, it's a bit tricky. So if you were to hit exclude here, you would think that when you think of it logically ourselves, what we see here would be that I'm creating a backup set with all .doc files within that backup set. So basically what I'm doing is I have a box and I'm putting all .doc files into that box and then I'm excluding it from my backup set. What actually happens is that you create a box and you're putting everything into it except .docs. So it doesn't exactly, unless you wanted to select everything on your machine except particular files, then yeah, that would work. But if it was just specifically .doc files you want to exclude, that wouldn't be the way to do it. Okay, and that's where I say, well, I go this include to exclude rule. It can be a bit confusing if you haven't used these backup sets or created backup sets yourself before. Okay, so what you want to do, okay, is include here. This option here, okay, files matching this set will be excluded from the final backup set. If you don't see this option here, when you go to add or create your own backup set, okay, you just want to go into options and select this option here, show advanced backup set features. Okay, so you just select that. Okay, and that will create then this option here for you. So what you're doing then, okay, is you're including. So what we're doing now is we have our box again. I don't want to back up .doc files, so maybe it might be .mp3 or music files that you want to exclude. You're getting your box, you're putting all your .docs into this, so you're including them, and then just before you do that, you click OK, click exclude, hit OK, and those 16 files now have been excluded from my backup. Okay, and as you can see, it's gone red to signify that these files now have been excluded, and I can no longer select them for backup. Okay, and as you can see here, I can see what files are in there, but I can't select them for backup. Even if they match another backup set, they will be excluded. Okay, so the exclusion rule supersedes an inclusion rule. Okay, so that's just how to create a custom backup set. And if there's any other questions on backup sets, I can go through them at the end. So what I'm just going to do now is just go into how you would add a network share. So it's straightforward enough. It's in here. You right-click on File System tab. In the white space, right-click, Add Network Share. Okay. You put in your share path if you know it, and your username and password if you have one, or if there's a mapped one, like there is here. So you can select that, hit OK, and it creates it for you. And it just comes up as a network share will come up on the Windows Explorer. Okay, so you can see it here. It's now created, and I can select files within there. Okay, and just a quick note on that: files that are on a network share won't get backed up if they're opened. Okay, so if a file is opened and your backup runs, what'll happen is it'll just get skipped. Why this happens is because we use VSS to back up open files, and the VSS cannot work over network shares. Now it has been, I believe, an update to that on the 2012 Windows Server OS, but I'm not 100% sure on the updates to that as of yet. But in a general rule, for every other OS, we can't back up open files on a network share, because VSS doesn't support it. Okay, so adding a network share, straightforward enough like that. It's just right-click and adding a network share. Put in your path, and if you have a username and password, you enter it. Hit OK, and it'll get added for you. Okay, and then just to right-click it if you want to do any changes. So you can change logon credentials for the share if they've changed, or you can just remove the share. And it's straightforward enough like that. Okay, so that's the demonstrations. I want to give as much time as I can to any questions that there may be. Okay, so we'll go with them there now. Okay. Yes, if Greg, just in terms of your question there, so what if the share is on the server that's been backed up? Wouldn't VSS work correctly if you were to simply click the share folder in the file system? If the actual share is on the server, then yeah, it should work straightforward enough. As long as VSS can pick up the share and it's on the actual server, connected, say, like a hard drive would be, then it would pick it up. Yeah, no problem. Yes. If in that instance, if it was picking up as just another drive on the machine, then the open files will be backed up. David, just in relation to what kind of reporting capabilities are available, could you clarify that question? Yeah, so I have the list of participants, the people who registered from the GoToMeeting software, and once we have this video session, this webinar edited, what I'll do is it'll be posted to our forums, and what I'll do is I'll send the link out to everybody who's registered for the session. Oh yeah, okay, so if you want to just show what files have been backed up, okay, so straight here. So if you can see that there now, just let me double check that you're able to see that. So yeah, so if you wanted to show what files were backed up, just hit that one there and it'll show you all the files are backed up, and you can search through it if you need to be. Does that work, David? So that will show you all the files that are backed up. Okay. So the easiest, I mean, the easiest, I suppose, would be like, I mean, there's no direct output report for listing a list of files that you would have backed up. The easiest thing to show that would if you showed your backup sets here and you had your files and folders selected in there, and it would give you a list. It'll show you in there individually files and folders that are backed up. Unfortunately, there is no way to pull out a list of the files that you've backed up. Okay, I'm not aware of anything worked for future releases in relation to actually a report being created for the files you've been backed up. That's the only list that we have available to show what files have been backed up at the moment. I'm not aware of anything that's been worked on for that, David, unfortunately. But if it is something that you feel you need, what I would recommend is on our forums there is an enhancement request page. So for users' suggestions on enhancements that they think would be beneficial, and our development team actually check that on a regular basis for ideas. No problem, David. Thank you. Eric, your question, where do you determine how many generations are created for each file or database? Can I ask you to expand on that question and what you mean? Neele, your question on you're backing up SQL 2005 database, is there a question to go along with that? Hi, Dennis. Do you have a question? Okay, so if Eric, you're asking about your backup runs. So if you want to restore a particular date, you can do that. So it all depends on how many times you would run your backup. Okay. Sorry, Greg. Nobody else can speak. They're just on. I'm just reading out people's questions as they come up here, just so that everybody else knows what I'm talking about. Okay. So as I was saying, it all depends on what you have set up in here, Eric. So your actual performance. So your scheduling. How many times each day you back up. Okay. So then if you want to restore files. You can then search by date, okay, and you can change. So as you can see here, I have all these mini backups. So these are all my backups that have occurred today, and then so you could go back a day and restore from that. So we don't stipulate. I mean, you can run up to 12 backups a day. So from here in your options, you can see that you can change your automatic backups to run up to 12 times a day. Once you do that, and if you do run 12 backups a day, then you can come in here and you will see all your individual versions. So if you want to go back, say 2 or 3 days, say or that you were working on a presentation and something went wrong with it, and you wanted to restore to, say, the presentation, the way you had the presentation yesterday at 12 o'clock, then you could restore the backup of the file from the nearest time to that. So maybe if the backup ran for you, say at 11:30, you could restore that particular file. Does that cover what you were trying to say or not? Just let me know either way, and I can try and explain it further. So you want to set up Mozy that will keep backups from earlier days, like so 3 days ago. Yeah, sorry for that, Greg. If somebody is not sending it to all, then it just comes to me. If they send them privately, or sorry, yeah, if they're sending them privately, so the questions are just coming to myself. So unless people send them to all, then everybody's not going to see the questions. That's why I'm trying to read out the questions as they come in before I answer them. Apologies for that. So just in terms, so what we're looking at here is Eric's question on generations for his files. So he's looking to set his backup in a way that Mozy will keep backups from earlier days, like 3 days ago. So we keep, so if I think what you're asking is correct, so we will keep 30 days of versions for you. So like that, like if you have your backups, say if you backed up particular files 3, 4, 5 days ago, and they change over the next, so we back up files today, they change over the next 5 days. You can actually choose then which file to restore. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Yeah, exactly, Eric. So Eric has just messaged here saying that he can choose the file to restore just in case he got a database corrupted in a certain day and got backed up. Yes, exactly. You can restore it to an earlier version. Yes, you can restore back to a version where you know the database wasn't corrupted or the file wasn't corrupted. No worries, Eric. We got there eventually. Apologies for the confusion. There any other questions? Yeah, Greg, about SQL? Oh, sorry. Yeah, so there's a backup set. So you have them here. Okay, so VSS backup sets for SQL Server. Okay, and you also have your regular SQL Server backup set here that would pick up all the individual databases as well if you wanted to select that. Okay, SQL Server doesn't tend to be much of an issue because it's not as volatile in terms of how many transactions are occurring as opposed to kind of like Exchange. So there is a regular backup set, as you can see there, and it selects all the databases in relation to SQL, and then you have the particular VSS backup sets for specific SQL databases. Okay. And the advantage of this is that they're taking actual snapshots of the database as it's occurring, and it just becomes easier to restore using these VSS backup sets, those databases, if you should need to. Is that okay, Greg? Oh, yes, unfortunately, yes, Windows 2000 doesn't have VSS, which is a hindrance, I know. So what I would say is that you could create a backup set in here yourself if it's not populating here. If your SQL backup set like this one here isn't populating, what I would say is you could create your own backup set in here and search the location that you have your file being backed up to, and then selecting that. Okay. So we would just be creating a backup set here, or you could continue backing up in the file system tab. Okay, Dennis has asked a question. He selected a SQL database file for backup in the file system. When the backup ran, the file was open. He wasn't aware of it being open. The application service was stopped and the backup failed. So the service was not auto-restarted. How do you avoid this other than running the backup when the file isn't being used? What I would recommend is if you do have obviously, like in Greg's situation, he's running Windows 2000 where it doesn't have VSS. What I would recommend, Dennis, is that if you do have, if you are running a Server OS older, so 2003 or 2008, I'd recommend using the VSS backup set for the SQL database rather than the file system tab. Other than that, what I'd say is you could set the service to start it on automatic and increase the amount of times it will restart after any failure. in terms of how would you avoid running the backup when the file is being used. That's a tricky one. Maybe you're scheduling your backups to run overnight or maybe at hours where you know the SQL database is not being accessed would be my only recommendation there. Because, obviously being a SQL database is probably being used a lot. Your only hope that running a backup when it's not being used is probably in hours where the people are out of the office and it's not going to be accessed. So maybe scheduling, so you could come in here to options, okay, and scheduling and set a scheduled backup to run at a particular hour, maybe after office hours, would be probably my best recommendation for you. So just let me know if that answers your question, Dennis. Okay, so question in there from Joe. Can I restore one file backed up 3 months ago? If you're backing up that file consistently, then you should be able to back up prior versions of the file. If you have stopped backing up that file, then there's the chance that file will have been removed after 3 months from our servers. Okay, if you've been consistently backing up that file, then you should be able to access it. However, if you have not been backing up that file consistently, and it's been a file from 3 months ago, but probably won't be accessible. Yeah. Greg, you're just asking me in relation to edit backup set on. I assume you're meaning this one. Okay. So I'll just pop that up there. Okay. So it's not actually. It's actually the backup set itself is actually just selecting from. There's no rules in there. It's just selecting from the actual SQL files. There's no particular rules involved in that one. Okay, Josh, if I select the VSS backup sets for the databases that I want, do I need to select anything in the SQL Server backup? You don't see the option. No, you don't. If you've selected SQL Server, if you selected the SQL Server VSS backup sets, that will back up everything that you need for SQL Server. That's because, and they are created by the system. So these files are pulled by Windows when we scan the file system. So that is all the files that you would need in the VSS backup sets. That would be all the files in relation to SQL. Or if it would be Exchange or Active Directory or any of them. So we'll pull those files for you. So as you can see, 2 seconds there, if we come in here, so it's selecting the particular files for the master, the model, and the MSDB. For those ones, and as you see for Active Directory, it's selecting the 4 files I would need. So these would be the files that I would need if I was to do a restore of this database using the Active Directory to restore it using VSS. So let me know if that answers your question, Josh. Okay, Dennis, perfect. Thanks very much. Okay, so as you saw there, Greg, sorry, that is just basically that backup set is actually just pulling the files directly from the Microsoft SQL Server folder. So there's no rules created with it. Okay. Eric, in terms of 2x Protect, okay, so that's Mozy's local backup. So So if you want to enable 2x protection, come in here to the Options tab, and you can just select the destination drive. So if you do have a network share, you can add that as the location. Okay. So what happens in that instance? It's the same as adding the network share for. So it's the same as adding a network share to back up a network share. It's the same process here, and it will just use space on the network share then for the local backups. Okay. It works at the same time. So once a backup is running to our online servers, it'll be at the same time sending data to our to your local location. So does that make sense, Eric? If you want to follow up, I would recommend maybe just jumping on maybe with one of our support agents on live chat, and maybe get them to set up a remote session which is straight away. Be the fastest way. You get a live with a live chat, you can get a remote session set up straight away for yourself, and have them maybe take a look at it if you've been having any issues with setting it up. That's just in relation to the local backup. Okay, so we're coming close to the top of the hour. Are there any other questions I could answer real quick before we finish up? Perfect. Thanks very much, David. I'm glad you got some benefit out of it. And as I said, I'll be sending on, once we have this up on our forums, I'll be sending on the link to the session to everybody who registered today for the webinar. So thanks very much. No problem, Eric. Thanks very much for joining us. Okay, well, that draws an end to February's webinar. Thanks so much for everybody for joining. Really appreciate you taking the time to sit in with us. As I said previously, I will be sending out the link to the recording once it has been formatted and put onto our forums. So thanks again for all the great questions and for taking the time today to join us. And we'll see you all again in March. We'll be targeting the 20th of March. As of today, it should be the 20th of March. The invite should be sent out about a week and a half before the definite date. Okay. Thanks everybody. Thanks everybody.